On YouTube, let's go. Okay, well, I think this is it. I think we're up.
Say, I see us live on YouTube. I'm not actually seeing a stream, so let me check. Oh, there we go. I see myself. I will check over here. And I see us too. Fantastic.
Fantastic.
Well, hello. Welcome to Derps Talk About Games. I'm your co-host, Mango.
And I am your co-host, Buddy.
Today we're going to talk a little bit about the refreshing taste of a creamy Guinness, the official beer of Atlantis. But before you do that, buddy, why don't you tell the folks at home what it is we do on this podcast?
Listen, on this podcast, we talk about cape shit, okay? And today, we witness the ignominious, the tragic end of the DC Extended Universe. Begun in 2013, 10 years ago, with Man of Steel, ended not with a bang, but with the whimper that is Aquaman 2, shoved out into theaters without a real press campaign. You know, the first trailer, I think, came in October. Maybe just like the least hyped the movie ever, you know, is this one. And I guess we're going to talk about it. So, yeah.
Yeah. We'll give our pre-spoiler impressions. I am interested to see what you think, because you're typically more forgiving of these movies than I am, but I thought this movie was a mess, is maybe the best way to put it. There's like a half-decent movie hiding in there somewhere, but it's like behind just like a shit pile of like bathos and like weird choices and what I think are like, you know, weird editing decisions. I don't think this is quite spoilers territory, but it felt like they started writing Amber Heard out of this movie and then stopped doing that. Like, there's a couple of scenes that like don't make a lot of sense in context if Amber Heard's still around. I guess we'll talk about that in the spoilers section.
I'm definitely down to talk about all of this in the spoiler section. Is there more?
No, that's like, I thought it was bad, and not even like I was resentful of the Marvels. I was not resentful of this movie.
Sure.
I thought this movie was kind of cringy, and I thought there were some like good things in here that were interesting, but just kind of, like I said, like covered by a pile of shit. But like, I don't know. I wouldn't quite go so far as to say call it interesting in like the way that like a bad movie could be interesting, but it's interesting in kind of like, how did this end up this way type of thing, right? It doesn't necessarily require actually watching the movie, but like that's kind of my takeaway. What are your thoughts, buddy?
I so thoroughly loved this movie. It's actually like hard for me to say like how much I loved this movie. It's the perfect movie for me. It's me. It's for me. And this is the thing. This is the thing. I think it's a good movie
for you, buddy.
I think it's great. And I would go to bat for it being like a good quality picture. But in order to do so, you have to literally be in my brain, because all of the things that worked for this movie
so much. This is all the stuff you hate.
Right? The stuff that I know. And there is stuff I'm sort of dressing out. There is stuff that I hate about this movie, but there's a lot of stuff that works about this movie that it only works if you are specifically me, right? As the person who obsessed about the movie in 2018, here's a better way for me to frame this. In like 2015, 2014 or something, a movie came out called Pirates of the Caribbean 5. I think it's Pirates of the Caribbean on Stranger Tides, maybe. Is the fifth movie in the saga. That movie had a truly baffling amount of lore callbacks to previous Pirates of the Caribbean movie. And I think we were doing the podcast at the time, and I think I was like, who is this movie for? Like, who is the person who cares so deeply about like the intricate lore connections between like Will Turner and Elizabeth Swann or whatever, who are the characters from Pirates of the Caribbean? This is the same thing, right? But it's for a movie I so deeply love. every second of, right? And for a mythos that I so deeply love every second of, that it works in so many ways that would only work for me, because like you have to like walk in with that level of sort of like expectation. And maybe you could make an argument that the movie is bad because of that. I kind of would say that's like, I don't know how we could probably talk about how to parse that,
yes.
right? But
so
yes,
the reason I think this movie is bad is not because of the level of callbacks to the first movie. The reason I think this movie is bad is for like a generic movie bad reasons.
Okay, that's interesting. I was actually, funnily enough, I was expecting a generic movie bad, but I didn't get that. I didn't get that almost at all. I was surprised. Maybe it's just expectations. I was surprised how well the movie hung together, how well the plot was constructed, how there were a lot of these kind of callbacks to things that were, planting and payoff, right? Like this kind of stuff. When I think of a bad movie, I think of movies that fail on those grounds, right? Like on those kinds of structural grounds. And Aquaman had a lot of stuff that just like, it just got the job. I don't know. It just got the job done. And I don't know. We can talk about that. This may be the first time we've disagreed on a movie in a long time.
At least to this degree, because like the thing that threw me off the most in this movie, and maybe this was like this way in the first movie and I just forgot, but like the amount of like really bad bathos in this movie, like, really rubbed me the wrong way. And there's also some stuff in here about like, I don't know, maybe this is me taking the movie too seriously, but there's some like bad, like if you apply the lessons of this movie to a similar real world scenario, the implications are very, very bad. But
I mean, the politics I am very interested in sort of like addressing and talking about. But well, let's listen. We can get into the spoiler section, I guess. For the record, I guess I do recommend this movie. I sort of recommend this movie out of spite. This is so much better. Honestly, this is what frustrates me. It's so much better than it deserves to be. You know what I mean? If this was The Flash, I would probably feel different. I have this almost like feeling of like, why do they promote The Flash so much? Like I like The Flash. We talked a lot about The Flash. I thought The Flash actually was a pretty fundamentally good movie because it was dealing with a lot of really interesting themes, and it was like, talking about all this other sort of stuff, even though it didn't hang together in very, very well at all. I just wish why did they promote The Flash when they could have promoted this movie? This movie actually could have, I don't know. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah, no, so Core, I will grant you that like promoting this movie, I will say I think this movie was better than The Flash. I was also not too up on The Flash, but that was more about like specific plot things that didn't jive with me, and I think that's just like a time travel thing.
Yeah.
I also think this movie was better than the Marvels. Absolutely better than the Marvels. What other
Cape shit
probably
this year?
Better?
Worse than Guardians 3.
Worse than Guardians 3.
I would actually say it's about as good as Across the Spider-Verse was, which was a movie I did have problems with, but I think you would say I'm way overstating it, right?
Yeah, I think that's insane.
Okay.
I'm not like, I don't think Across the Spider-Verse was as good as Enter the Spider-Verse or whatever the first one was.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Like on a good day, I would maybe put this on par with like Quantumania.
Oh yeah, I would put this way above Quantumania. But listen, yeah, let's get into it. Do you want to talk about Bathos first? This seems to be the thing
spoiler warning for people who care.
Sure. Yeah, spoiler. I will say for the record, man, I went into this unspoiled and it was so great. But like again, I'll explain why in this section, but like only me, you only get this if you're me, basically. It's kind of ridiculous.
Is it about Topo? Is it just because like they didn't put Topo in like League of Super Pets and he was in this movie?
Well, this is great and also true, right? Yeah, but it is not just because of Topo. I mean, I could talk about that if you want to talk about like the spoiler stuff that makes this so good, but maybe.
No, so like I said, like the I'm sure the lore deep cuts were fine, right? Like I said, I think there's a good movie hiding in here somewhere. I think it's just covered by a pile of shit. I think Randall Park's character was fucking terrible. I think Orm's character was like wildly inconsistent. I think the bathos was terrible. Like, you know, like Aquaman basically being like a weird kind of dismissive dickhead for parts of the movie. Aquaman himself reminds me of, this is gonna be a weird cut, but this reminds me of what's the character's name? He reminds me of the Asian character in the original Mortal Kombat. What is the main Asian character's name?
Liu Kang? No.
Yeah, Liu Kang.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah, he reminds me of Liu Kang in Mortal Kombat in that in some scenes he's a serious guy who does serious things. In other scenes he's like Johnny Cage's comic relief partner. And I felt that way about Arthur Curry in this movie.
Okay. Yeah, because the thing about the bathos, I'm fine with the bathos, generally speaking, in this movie. I mean, like, I don't know, not all those jokes landed for me. Like, I didn't laugh at all the jokes. But like, generally speaking, I'm fine with like this version of Arthur Curry. Though I do want to say for the record, I don't like, this is not true to Aquaman. This is the same problem I have with Thor, right? The Thor movies weirdly became comedic in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Like I guess Chris Hemsworth just really liked doing shtick, and they just sort of ran with that. And I like that. It's fine, but it is not true to the comics. And this is also true of Aquaman. Aquaman in the comics is a downer. He's melancholy. He is constantly under, he has the weight of the world, quite literally, right, on his shoulders, right? 2/3 of the world is his kind of territory, and he is trying to manage like the xenophobic sort of like, I don't know, just like the xenophobic, like piece of shit citizenry of Atlantis, while also keeping them from kind of engaging in their baser instincts. It's kind of like, he's sort of like, to put it in like a modern political perspective, it's like he's the president and he doesn't control the House or Senate, right? This is kind of how Aquaman works, where he's constantly negotiating and compromising with a superstitious, I don't know, cruel and malicious, right? Like, the people of Atlantis hate the surface world. They think the surface world is terrible and awful, and Aquaman is constantly kind of pulling them back from the brink, right? And all that tends to make him, like I said, kind of like a downer. He's quiet, he's brooding, he is kind of constantly like put upon, and the heroism in that is that he perseveres because the responsibility, Aquaman is all about responsibility. The responsibility is the most important thing. This is not the character that Jason Momoa is playing. It is true to Aquaman's character in the sense that his character is also all about responsibility, right? Like the core thing kind of at the beating heart of what makes Arthur Curry is responsibility. But whereas, in the comics, it is about how does Arthur kind of straddle as an outsider between, he's not quite a surface dweller, he's not quite an Atlantean, and he has the responsibility of creating harmony between these two opposing groups, basically, right? That's the responsibility in the comics. The responsibility in Aquaman the movie is he is fundamentally an irresponsible person who is, who needs to learn to take on responsibility. In the first movie, it is just about he is the one who can save the world, right, by deposing Thor, by deposing Orm, and becoming king of Atlantis. In the second movie, is all about him becoming, a dad and reconciling, right, his broken family, right, the responsibility of being a dad and reconciling his broken family. All of that sort of like works for me, right? And the bathos never undercuts that core of his character, even if he does make these jokes that are, I don't know, I would say sometimes cringy, right? The part where bathos bothers me is when it is the thing that is the joke, the butt of the joke, right, are the fundamental earnest pieces of the story itself, right? It is when, in a moment of like tension, there is a joke that diffuses the tension via anticlimax. It's the anticlimax that bothers me, right? And I never felt like there was any, there were no jokes in this movie that felt like they were at the expense of the drama. In fact, I would kind of go on to say that, like, this movie was overloaded with drama. There were like 800 plot twists where it was just like everything ramps. And there were sometimes bathos that kind of mixed in there. You know, there's a moment with Black Manta that you might consider to be bathos where, you know, Black Manta goes to punch Arthur and he just catches it and knocks him out with like one punch. But like, that is not, that is a moment that's funny, but it's in the midst of all of this drama. And it's not like it's making fun of that drama. Do you know what I mean? Because there's, this is literally, there is a new huge issue that he has to deal with, and he then goes and deals with that thing. Does that make sense?
It does. So like, I get what you're saying. I do get what you're saying. And I think I mostly agree with you. On those aspects. I think there were just like a lot of jokes. What I think my fundamental issues with the films are less about the that undercutting aspect. I'll give you that, and more about just kind of like how things are plotted out and like when they choose to drop jokes. Also, just like things that I think are just like stupid, right? Like the joke where his kid pees on him like 7 different times, and then Mira like water bends the pee onto him. It's like, but like, you know, like just like I said, I think the other things are a little bit bigger. Also, just kind of like things like the plot feels like it's a mess to me, right? I feel like there's a way to like wade your way through this plot and make it make sense, but like I said in the beginning part, it feels like in that opening scene they had started writing out Amber Heard, right? He does a toast to single parents, which feels like it's meant to be a toast to like him and his dad as both as single parents. But you know, like Mira is suspiciously out of that scene for like the entire opening scene. And then she like is in Atlantis and like, you know, nothing is made of it again. And I was like, when are they going to like explain that she died? Is she going to die here? Like, that's another thing. They don't kill anyone, right? Like, you know, I see Black Manta. I see his wife. I see his son. And it's like, this is one of the things I know. I know how this goes. And then like, one, they don't kill Mira. 2, I see that in that opening scene with the pirates, no one has a gun, which is like, that's just like, I know this is like a nitpicky thing, but it's like, how do fucking pirates take over a sea ship, like a sea cruiser, without any firearms? And I realized that the only firearms in this movie are like laser guns. And there's got to be a reason for this. I did not look it up. It's like, is this movie rated like PG or something? Was this like filmed within like the 6 months following Rust and no one wanted to have a real gun on set? Like, what the fuck happened with this? Like, what happened that happened? Do you know any of this stuff like behind the scenes?
No, I mean, I do know that it's PG-13, so you know, like you have to cut a lot of stuff to make PG-13. One of the things I was thinking that they might do is cut Aquaman's hand off, because it's like another piece of like, you know, like do you remember in the Across the Spider-Verse they talk about these canon events, right? And how like when Stacy dying, it's like, or I'm sorry, I guess they're talking about Captain Stacy dying. It's like a Spider-Man canon event. One of the canon events for Aquaman is that his hand gets chopped off, right? And he replaces it with the hook, the harpoon.
Right.
I thought they might do that, but then I was like, this is a PG movie. They're a PG-13 movie. They're not going to do that. Though I will say, I do think it is a true ding to the movie that nobody dies. I thought his mom was going to die. I thought his dad was going to die. I thought Orm was going to die. I thought Mira would have died. I would have been pissed, to be honest, if Mira died. You know, but they didn't. They pulled back from literally all of those, right? Every single one of those people gets a life-threatening injury and then recovers.
Yeah, no, I mean, like that's the other thing too, right? Like, is if they didn't fake it out, I feel like I might have felt better about it. That also feels like a thing that they like. It feels like they filmed both versions of that and decided which one to do afterwards, right? Like, and like you said, this is the end of the DCEU. They can do whatever the fuck they want, right? Like, maybe they can't like kill Arthur Jr. for the ratings, but like, that's what happens. That's what happens in the comic books, right?
That's what I'm talking about when I said that you like that. This stuff I feel like only works if you know this, right? Like that moment, I thought they were going to do it. To be honest with you, if you had asked me in the theater,
I think that makes it worse, right? Like the fact that I knew that like cuts the legs out from under it. If I didn't know that he was supposed to die, like if I didn't know that they were supposed to die, I would have been like, okay, it's a superhero movie. Nobody ever really dies. But me knowing that they're dying, like, especially with Mira, right? With Mira, I was like that cut the legs out of the stakes. A lot of the stakes of the movie for me right there, because I know that she's supposed to die, and she doesn't die there. And it's not even like they leave it ambiguous, right? They show you her in the hospital bed, right? Like,
well, first of all, hold on. Mira doesn't die. Why do you think she's supposed to die? She doesn't die in the comics. In the comics, the kid dies. Okay. Arthur Jr. dies, right?
Okay.
But to me, and this was genius, right? Or I don't know, it just worked for me really well, because I was like, if you had asked me in the theater, I would have said, they're going to kill this is the canon moment, right? Aquaman's infant son is murdered by Black Manta, right? That's technically what happens. It's much more complicated in the comics, and to be frank, those comics aren't great, right? But like, if you are a person reading an Aquaman comic in whatever, it's pretty common that they will reference how his son was killed, right?
Right.
And I went in. That was the thing I was expecting. So when Arthur Jr. lived, that was the plot twist, right? Like that functioned as the plot twist for me personally, because I had that extra sort of thing. Maybe this is just a matter of like, I was swept up in the movie though. Do you know what I mean? Like, I was just kind of like in it, and so like, I don't know. That was a moment that I was like freaking out. I thought they were gonna kill the baby. Because you can do that in there's the thing. It's like you can do that in a PG-13 way, right? Like he puts the baby off, like off frame, right? And then the knife comes down, and you know what happens, because like the crying baby's crying stops, and you know what happened, and you go, oh my fuck. But like, obviously that's not how that happened. But
yeah, I also felt like I knew that was not going to happen. Because the moment the tone of the movie was like this goofy antics type thing.
Okay.
Right? Like, you can't go from like, Aquaman makes Orm eat a cockroach to like murdering a literal baby, right? Like, you just can't do that in the same
movie. You know what? Okay, also fair.
I think the bigger thing too is like Randall Park's character is just a little too much for me, right? A little too goofball shoes for me, especially because he's getting like the heel face turn at some point, right? And like, I appreciate the kind of like I am going to hit Black Manta with a bomb instead, that all works. I think that as an arc works for me, but I also like, I don't know, things felt too mixed to me. God, what was the other thing? I also thought Orm was like weirdly, like, I would say inconsistently characterized.
Okay, right? This is really interesting. Explain what is the inconsistency in your mind?
I have no reason to believe that Orm is ever going to betray Aquaman, like, at all. Like the movie tells me, like, what is it? Nereus says that, you should watch out for him, right? Like, but that's the only thing that tells me that he's going to do anything. And then like the one moment where maybe he doesn't actually like betray Nereus, right? And I thought that moment was also out of character, like was like not in character for him. Like, the character that they set him up for in the beginning part of this movie is, it's essentially kind of like lawful evil almost, right? Like, bad dude, but like very dedicated to Atlantis and its goals and making sure that it can be a superpower, right? When he says, when this is over, I will surrender myself to the fishermen, because that is what it will take to maintain diplomatic relationships between Atlantis and fishermen. And this is how I honor Atlantis, right? And so, to me, it was never like a question that he would like, do the right thing. One, do the right thing in the end, and two, like, I was not convinced that he was going to, it was not convincing to me that he was tempted by the Black Trident, just like straight up. Like, they were maybe too good to his character earlier in the movie. They gave him like no kind of like.
I think I understand what you're saying, but isn't the problem then consistency and not inconsistency? Right? If the whole movie is showing you that Orm, I would describe Orm, that Orm is lawful evil neutral, right?
Sure,
I would probably say lawful neutral, right? He is not like Emperor Palpatine. He's not acting on selfish regards, right? But he is a lawful neutral villain.
This is an argument about what lawfully evil and lawful neutral means, right?
Sure,
like,
whatever the case may be, right? Yeah, he's lawful is the thing, right? He demonstrates in a number of different places where he is willing to, like where he commits to sort of this stuff, and then at the very end of the movie, there is a temptation that he doesn't go through, right? And the problem is that the temptation doesn't sell you, right? That's because he has been too consistently set up as he is a good guy and he's not going to betray his brother for the temptation to feel like an actual escalation of tension. You know how that's going to go, right? To me, that sounds like he's too consistent, so the temptation doesn't feel authentic.
Okay, so that's fair. The way I think I'll point this out is that like it expects me to believe that it's an option that he would like leave Nereus to die,
sure. And
it also expects me to like, because he does briefly succumb to the temptation. I didn't even buy that. What I thought was going to happen was like was instead of like thought they were going to kill Orm. I thought he was going to be like I thought they were going to do the Frozen Throne thing, right? Because it looks like the fucking Frozen Throne. It was like someone has to hold the Black Trident and sit on like the Frozen Throne, and it's going to be Orm.
I also thought this, by the way, and I would have said, by the way, that would have been a better ending, and I wish they did it, but they didn't. And I think this is still I think the ending that Orm got, I like his cheeseburger ending. I think it's great. It's like perfect for this character. I do want to say for the record that Orm is also very different than what he is in the comics, but I like this version. Frankly, I think I like this version of Orm better. Orm in the comics is just truly power hungry, right? He is just the jealous younger brother, and that's it. He deposes Aquaman and he continues to try and depose Aquaman for the rest of his life, and he has no depth or anything beyond that at all. This version of Orm, I think, this is my platonic ideal. This is what I've always wanted Orm to be, basically. Where his dedication is to Atlantis, and he is the personification of all those things, those negative things I said about Atlantis before: superstitious, traditional. He hates the surface world for all these other, for all these reasons. And this is the movie where he gets to kind of like come around. This, in a certain sense, almost feels like new canon, to be honest, right? Like, if I were writing Aquaman today, I would write this version of Orm because he's better and more interesting than like the version that's been in the comics for forever. Even as a deep Aquaman fan who loves, Aquaman in those comics. I don't know. And also, for the record, all of this worked for me. I also knew that Orm was not going to take it, but like to me, the temptation was like it was like the Ring. You know what I mean? Because like even Arthur was feeling it, right? There was with the swirling heads and the whatever Kordax is trying to influence both of them or whatever. To me, it's just like, this is the most magical sort of temptation, but in the same way that I know that whatever, Superman is going to punch General Zod to death, right, or whatever, and win. I know that Orm is not going to succumb to the temptation.
So that is the problem, right? Like, even if my intellectual mind knows that like the good guy is going to win, right? You have to convince me in the moment that it's possible that he couldn't. And that didn't happen to me for Orm. And like the temptation did happen, seemed to be wildly out of character for the Orm that was in this movie. And that specifically didn't work for me. But there, like I said, there are worse things in this movie. The I don't know. Just the movie just didn't work for me in a lot of ways, and I guess the way that it worked for you. So why don't you talk about some things you liked about this movie that I've basically been bitching for?
I mean, that stuff was good. Another huge thing for me is Black Manta. I loved Black Manta in this movie, and it's entirely because of the zeitgeist. Black Manta is just fueled by petty revenge to the last. I talk all the time about the difference between a hero and a villain. Heroes change, villains don't, right? And the archetypal way that these stories work, and the original Aquaman is actually a really good example of this. The archetypal way that these stories work is the hero confronts the villain early in the story and loses, and then the hero changes And because of that change, they are able to grow, become a better person, right? And unlock a new level of potential so that when they fight the hero, when they fight the villain again, they win, right? In the original Aquaman, he faces off against Orm in the pit of fire, and he gets fucked, right? Mira has to bail him out, and they mentioned that in this movie. But Aquaman has to go through the process of realizing that, one, he needs to take this responsibility seriously. He's been irresponsible this whole time. He needs to, actually understand what's at stake. And two, he has to understand that the thing that is driving his sense of irresponsibility, this kind of like self-deprecation or whatever, is also sort of humility. And by accepting that humility, he becomes king of Atlantis. He gets like the thing or whatever. Because that's the thing that he says to the Kraken. The Kraken says, "Hey, why are you worthy of Atlan's trident?" And he says, I'm not. But if I don't get this trident, then the oceans, are going to like destroy the people of the surface world. And I can't let that happen. And the Kraken's like, good answer, right? And it's that kind of thing of like, it's like in Indiana Jones or whatever, right? Where it's the humble chalice that's the actual holy grail. It's right. The unsuspecting answer is that the Kraken was essentially looking for. This is how character arc. This is how character arc works out. Villains don't do this. They do not change, right? A villain, when presented with the opportunity to change, typically would face oblivion, and that's exactly what happens, right? Black Manta falls down this hole. Aquaman reaches down to save his life, right? Which was the thing, by the way, that he refused to do to Aquaman's dad in the first place. He, obviously, I complained about that whole thing being stupid and convoluted. I wish it wasn't. I wish he just fucking killed Black Manta's dad. That's what happens in the comics, and it's awesome. But, whatever. Sure, it's a movie. The thing that he is guilty of is not saving the life when he had the opportunity to, right? And he corrects on that mistake here by offering to save Black Manta's life. And because Black Manta is a good villain who is committed to his bullshit to the very end, he would rather fall into oblivion than accept help from the man he has convinced himself that, he needs to literally destroy the whole world to kill, right? And I also just appreciated that there's no goodness to, there's no sympathetic Magneto, Killmonger, Thanos of, oh, well, if I global warming, I'm gonna...
I don't know. There's global warming in this. It's just like not actually the plot of the movie. Weird, like
yeah. Because for those of you who haven't seen the movie, part of what he's doing is burning orichalcum, right? This special fuel that is like a super giga fossil fuel, I guess. It's like it's heating up the whole world because he's trying to unfreeze the lost kingdom in Antarctica, basically, right? He's not doing that for any altruistic reason. There is no reason for him to do that except for his own personal vendetta against Aquaman because he feels like Aquaman killed his dad. And so it was so nice seeing a villain like that, right? For once, instead of some villain who's like doing, just like these weird trolley problem. There's no trolley problem. That's really what it comes down to. So fucking trolley problem. This is not a trolley problem movie. Black Manta's just a piece of shit, okay? He's just a piece of shit with cool ass lasers, and he fights with a black trident, and that shit's cool. Like,
yeah, no, that is fair, I guess. Yeah, no, so I will say I don't really have any problems with Black Manta directly. Like, most of my problems in the villain side of the movie are with
Dr. Shin.
With the goofy kind of side characters, and also with like, I don't know, like there's just some like weird like individual moments that were weird to me, like I'm not convinced that like the whales singing at the Sonokadon shouldn't just work every time in the first place, but that's like a very nitpicky thing.
That is maybe my favorite detail, and I'm not going to go too deep into this because Rachel is behind me, and I think that detail is going to be the funniest thing that she ever sees. Just remind me in like 2 weeks to mention this, and I will explain why this is so fucking funny. But that detail, I love that detail just because it's funny. It's also very classic Aquaman. This is the kind of stuff that I think most people would agree with you and they would find kitschy and dumb and lame, right? Because this is like, it's just like not as cool as like, I don't know, other superpowers are cool, I guess. But this is like traditional Aquaman stuff, right?
Sure.
And frankly, this has been missing from both movies for finding interesting ways to use his ability to talk to animals is something that wasn't really in either of these movies. This is kind of a passable attempt at it, right?
So my issue with this is not that it's not cool or interesting. It's that if it's this is like a classic kind of like cinema cine type problem or like a plot holy type problem. It's like, this is like, why hasn't the time turner solved every problem ever in Harry Potter? Right? Like, it's like, if you think about the wider ranging implications of the use of this power, why aren't problems not trivial?
I understand exactly. Yeah. For instance, one of the things that happens in Aquaman comics is, like plankton, like plankton, super small. There's like a fight where he like, I guess he kind of paralyzes them. He makes someone start convulsing into seizures, right? And it's because he floods their brain. They're breathing. It's another Atlantean. They're breathing in seawater, and he's like putting extra plankton in their seawater, and it gets to like a concentrated point in their brain, and he basically like tells the plankton to like fuck him up, basically. It's a comic. It's not like super well detailed what he does, but yeah. And it's just like, boy, if Aquaman can just fucking like brain melt anybody, why doesn't he do that every time, right? It's that kind of thing.
Yeah, or like, well, why doesn't Mira just like pull the blood out of people, right? Like that kind of thing. Then I don't know if like she is able, like usually you get around this by being like, I can't do that for some reason. But the moment you like, you do it once, right? Like I think there's like,
this is like hold on maneuver kind of like stuff.
Right? Yes, exactly. That is a great example, right? Like, yes.
Yeah, I mean, there's actually a really good example for me in this one, which is why doesn't he use the fucking Kraken? The whole thing in the end of the last movie is that he comes out in the middle of this huge ass war with all of the creatures in the trench and the Kraken in order to just like kick the shit out of everybody. And you'd think like, boy, Aquaman with a fucking Kraken who he can just summon at will, giant fucking sea monster, right? That seems pretty dangerous. Also, there's clearly a bunch of sea creatures that are like in here. Can he not talk to those creatures? Because like they're frozen in the ice. Are they also undead? None of that stuff gets explained. I would probably grant all of these criticisms. This is kind of what I mean when I say that like I do think the movie has problems and is worse than something like Guardians 3, right? But yeah. Anyway, yeah.
No. So I absolutely agree. I also feel like, I guess part of the thing that bothered me about is it felt like they took a decent movie and ran it through a Marvel filter, right? That's where I think a lot of these jokes came from. It's like, everybody liked the Brian King in the last movie. That was super cool. Let's do 3 times as much Brian King and not think about it at all. Just throw the Brian King in and have him have a couple of lines, right? Like, he's a cool character. No, I think the Brian King's a cool character, but it definitely felt like, fan favorite gets an extended kind of take because, he was a fan favorite, right? Not because like he actually had a place in the plot. That kind of thing.
Yeah, but oh god, there's so much stuff that in that, because this is the thing that I was afraid of. I thought that maybe the movie didn't have a budget, and so they couldn't go to like the gonzo degree. This is the thing that I think makes Aquaman 2018 a good movie is essentially the imagination of it, right? I talk about how big it feels compared to everything. That's the thing that it does that is kind of like new and novel, especially when so many of these other sort of like superhero movies feel so weirdly small and contained in comparison. But I felt like this delivered on that, right? And part of it is I think is maybe down to like the raw action. I don't know. This is a bigger point than just the Brian King, but yeah, I don't know. I felt like it delivered on that, but I do see what you mean about like the Brian King is a fan favorite, so he shows up a whole bunch and he's constantly doing shtick. When honestly, I would probably also count this against the movie because the Brian King is cool in Aquaman 2018, and everybody liked him, but I didn't like it because he was doing shtick. You know what I mean? Like him being comic relief actually kind of ruins it a little bit for like him specifically.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. Like it's because he is like a serious character that just like happens to be like a little goofy in like presentation, rather like the kind of like Monty Python level bit of like, I lost my claw, I grew it back, I lost my claw again. Like that really like is just kind of like, not my favorite. Not my favorite at all.
Okay, yeah. I think honestly, part of that is that there wasn't, maybe Nereus is supposed to be the straight man. I think part of why I'm forgiving of the humor is because it's a straight man comic routine between Aquaman and Orm, right? Because Orm is just a straight man the whole time, and so Aquaman is doing shtick, and then Orm is there, and he's like, Papa, and like that, that works. That's just like normal stuff. And they're also kind of keeping it contained, right? Like it's not really in the big scenes of like maximum drama. And then there is also underneath the shtick, right? There is also true drama and character, right? That's coming out. The stuff about them being brothers and having to sort of like reconcile I would like, if you take out all of those scenes in the movie, then the final scene with their fighting over the Black Trident doesn't work, right? Because it works based on the connection that they've been able to forge, and the connection, even though it's had in these kind of bathos adjacent scenes, it's like he tricks his brother into eating a cockroach or whatever, which I actually thought that bit was pretty funny. That is part of what makes the bathos work for me in the movie, right? I feel like when Marvel bathos is bad, if I were to take the bathos out, the movie is fine. It's better even, right? Because it's not constantly like kind of getting at the underlying drama and the themes and story and stuff that's going on. In this version, the bathos is still a part of the supporting structure of the movie in its kind of totality, right?
Yeah. I get that.
Maybe the jokes are just bad.
I also think there are particular. I think it's not an all or nothing thing, right? Like there are like when I think about the things that like really struck me the wrong way is like is like Aquaman, who's supposed to be on the super stealthy mission, because if the Fisher people find out, then like it's gonna cause like all this political chaos in Atlantis. Right, is like, come on, Castaway, we gotta get out of here, right? Like that rubbed me wrong. Orm like starting to Naruto run, and like Aquaman having to be like, what the fuck are you doing? Like that worked for me. I thought that was good.
I also thought that. I think maybe what I would say is I think some of the jokes are just bad. Maybe because I think I'd probably agree with those two things. And to me, the difference there is one of those jokes is kind of cringe, and the other one is actually funny, which is maybe just like, I don't know, telling Jason Momoa to do improv 8 times over the course of the movie comes away with 5 duds and 3 bangers, and that's kind of like that's kind of what you work with. There's like this thing where he was talking about like the butthole or whatever, and I was just like, what are we talking about? What is going on here?
Yeah no, but I think you're probably right there. That was another thing, is I'm sure I heard this wrong, but when he's beating up the pirates, I thought he called the pirates cumlickers, which is clearly not what he said. It's probably like scumlickers or something like that.
Chumlickers. He's calling them chumlickers because it's a fish thing. Cumlickers. Oh my god.
He's saying it to us.
To a infant kid. Yeah. Oh my god, holy shit. Okay. So does the context of Mera not dying in the comics, does that change the way that you look at sort of like her character, or
a little bit? Yeah. No, I think my bigger issue with her is it felt like they were trying to write her out for parts of it and like change their mind again halfway through that, if that makes sense.
I was one of the things I was actually mad about in the movie. To be fair, there's a part of me that wants to be permissive, because the movie doesn't have to be about them. The first movie is about him and Mera, because Mera is sort of the agent of change, right? She is the one who convinces him to take his role seriously. She is essentially the person who says, you need to take responsibility, and like is part of that character arc. And as they fall in love or whatever, that's how he is able to sort of like fully realize this stuff. It's when Mera gets hurt, right? That he's like, oh my God, this is serious, right? You, because of what I did, because of my irresponsible actions, you could have gotten hurt, and I can't deal with that. And I think that, like, you know, this is part of the first movie. The second movie doesn't have to be about him and his wife, right? She can just kind of be a background character. It's about him and his brother. And I was trying to sort of be permissive about that through like the first half of the movie, but it really did feel like a whole, because one of the things that I think makes Aquaman unique is Mira. And to be honest, Mira is so much better in the comics just because she's like able to do cool. She's brutal in the comics. She like kills people and fucks people up. I think I mentioned this last time in the storyline Blackest Night, where you know, it's like Green Lantern shit or whatever, and there's a bunch of superheroes who get different powers. Superman gets the Ring of Hope, Wonder Woman gets the Ring of Love, Mira gets the Ring of Anger, and she becomes a Red Lantern for the duration of Blackest Night because she's just that like brutal and mean and angry. And there are just a lot of moments where, even in the Lost Prince storyline, like the storyline where her son gets killed, right? Aquaman kind of mopes around for a couple of issues, and it's Mira who is the one who's like actually going and hunting Black Manta because she's like, you killed like my fucking kid, right? And for a while I also sort of thought that they were writing her out of the movie, especially because she gets like blasted in the chest and put in that like jellyfish pod or whatever. And I was like, oh, I understand, right? This is just like caving to public pressure, and they're just gonna like write her out of the movie, even though this is insanely out of character and also insanely dumb, because obviously, you know, she's gonna want to have a stake in protecting Atlantis. But then that didn't happen, right? You know, she saves his life. She comes in. She's part of the big final battle. You know, she's constantly shown really caring about, you know, him and her son. And I was just like, thank God, to be honest with you, thank God that they actually sort of delivered, at least in sort of the back half. So I think I understand what you're saying, because I did feel that kind of in like the middle of the, I don't know, like in the middle of the movie, but I don't know. I guess I would say that they saved it in the end for me because she actually got to show up and do stuff.
Yeah, no, it is not like, obviously I don't have the same type of background with the story as you, and it could have gone either way for me, right? I just wanted it to feel like it was written consistently, and it didn't, right? Like I said, that opening scene where like she's just like not around at the lighthouse at all, and it feels weird, is like, and he like makes a single dad comment, right? Is like, that is not a problem directly with the plotting. That's a problem kind of, I guess, with like the like, not a problem with the plot, it's a problem with the writing, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I think, or like maybe it's like the editing or the cut or something. Like, and that, again, that's not a problem with, and just other like I said, it felt like they pulled their punches a lot in this movie in a lot of different ways. But you know, I don't think any of that's insurmountable. I just didn't particularly enjoy it. I thought it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little not sure how much I want to get into this, but part of this is also that I just like, I think I would have been pissed if they did cave to like the public pressure around like Amber Heard being Amber Heard or whatever.
Sure.
Just because like, I don't know, I don't want to get into this. Whatever the case may be. I mean, yeah.
It's fine. Like I do not care about the specifics of that culture war. Right?
Yeah.
I just care insofar as it affects the story. Right?
I
like,
just know
recast it with a different person. I don't care.
Yeah, it is the kind of thing that I have seen so much of, because, you know how like, you're on Twitter or whatever, you're on Facebook, and it'll recommend you things because it knows what you like and you care about, right? I click on links about Aquaman, and so I get Aquaman trending in the sidebar, and for a while I just couldn't even click on it, because every time I did, it was just like, you know, it's just stuff about her and this court case, and not even, you know what? I just don't want that to like affect these things, right? It's important to me that the character is a part of the story, and I don't know. I'm dancing around this like as hard as I possibly can. It really would have bothered me if Mira got cut out of the movie because of like a weird controversy with the actress, right? Yeah, and it's not even like, I don't know, like, you know, Jonathan Majors obviously just got recast, right? Or not even recast. He got fired. He just got completely dropped by Marvel because he lost his court case for assault. That to me is like perfectly fine and reasonable, and I think that that's a good kind of solution. But yeah. I was pleasantly surprised, I guess, probably because I have just been reading these really like angry sort of, I almost want to call them like disinformation tweets or whatever about people who are begging Warner Brothers to either recast or drop Amber Heard from the movie that she shot 3 years ago, right? And it's just like, can we like not deal with this? It's the last thing.
Yeah. I mean, they put out a movie with 2 Ezra Millers. So
yeah, I mean, the problem is yeah, you know what? I don't want to talk about this. We can just
yeah. Let's talk about the other thing that I thought was weird about this movie,
okay,
and that bothered me, which is like vaguely in the same kind of like sphere, which is like I don't want to call it like the politics of the movie, but like the political theory maybe of the movie, which seems to be like, if the monarch is convinced of his righteousness, he should use his will to power to like overrun everything else and just do what the thing that he thinks is right.
Yeah, he was like, fuck democracy, Also, it is okay for the president to commit crimes when it is, politically advantageous for you to go free your brother from, like the neighboring kingdom to use him to go track down Black Manta or whatever. Yeah.
So the scene I think that really like drove this home for me is the scene in like the criminal kingdom, right? Like this is, and like if I'm gonna put it in like first of all, I actually did kind of like the scene. I like the kind of like Star Wars-y feel of it, right? It felt like like the cantina or something, right? But it's literally like Orm is the realist, right? Orm understands that like sometimes you have to like deal with reality, and like you can't be an idealist, and he's wrong. Aquaman should have just punched him from the beginning, right? Like that would have like solved the problem, right? I'm just kind of like, I don't like, this is like Superman is a good dictator levels of like I can't, bothers me from, like I said, for like a political theory level, which I don't want to hold against the movie too much because like this level of like, yo bro, it's a PG-13 superhero movie, it's not that deep.
It's like Lord of the Rings is not a monarchist film, right? Like it is not a film about how monarchy is good. It's a film about friendship, right? And the extreme
honor and obligation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, all of that stuff, right? And we would probably say that, for instance, Aragorn becoming king at the end of the movie, right? Like this isn't any kind of, it's like, you could make a weirdly eugenicist argument about that because the blood of Numenor and stuff like that, and technically like Boromir and Denethor don't have the blood of Numenor, and so they're evil. And it's just like the movie's not about any of these things, right? It is just a straight, kind of fantasy mythological tale about other stuff. And I kind of feel like this movie is in the same sort of place, right? The laws of Atlantis are built to be like a stakes raising impediment, right? It's not making comment on, whether or not it's okay to have monarchies in the modern world, though it is obviously super funny when the ending of the movie is Aquaman addressing the United Nations.
So that is the thing that I will say separates it from something like Lord of the Rings, right? Like Lord of the Rings does not come to us and like does not put in front of us that like it doesn't say that the men of the East are evil because they're dark skinned, right? It says to us that the men of the East are evil because they pledge their loyalty to Sauron.
Yes,
right.
Correct.
Like this movie kind of does say that Aquaman is right to like to override these people, to override the things that he thinks are bad, which I think is like not a great message. And I don't think it's the primary focus of the movie, but it is like a thing that is presented as a good thing in the movie that bothers me a little bit.
Yeah. You know what? Yeah, that's true. It is pretty funny. It would be funny if Aragorn were to come address the United Nations. I'm having like a Robot Chicken skit like play out in my head where, like Frodo and Sam are like trying to give UN, like get UN resolutions passed or something. Anyway, yeah. Yeah, I think the other thing about like the politics of this is just like when it comes to sort of like the global warming piece of it. This is a common thing in Aquaman stories, and frankly, I think it always sucks, even as like an Aquaman fan. I'm sorry, I don't think it always sucks. Here's what I think sucks. When it is used to be weirdly sort of preachy or, you know, I don't know, like make some sort of extra comment on things, that's the problem when it, to me. When Aquaman says in this final thing with like the UN stuff or whatever, when he's talking about like, oh, destroying, you know, like, oh, we're destroying the world with global warming and we need to like band together to sort of like stop that. There's a part of that just kind of like does get under my skin in like a, I don't know, just like it's like,
is it too woke for you, buddy?
It's almost it's too real for me. It sort of breaks my suspension of disbelief in a weird way. What I like about it is the doomsday clock, right? Saying, sure, you know, the villain of the movie is doing this thing that is catastrophically affecting the climate of the world. He's going to blow up the world by essentially using global warming. Okay, sure. I'm fine with that, right? But it's not like staking like a moralistic position. It's not like trying to convince me that global warming is bad. It's not like, you know, like Al Gore. Not that I think that the movie goes to that like level and is that level of preachy, just that it kind of like, it gets a little to the edge there. And there are Aquaman comics and Aquaman stories that go over that edge that kind of do like bother me, right? Like, for instance, one of the things I like about the Aquaman stories that fulfill this sort of political thing is the tension between, you know, kind of, you have like the secular surface and sort of the superstition. I keep saying superstition, but it's like, it's almost religious. It's like, it's so complicated in like the super comics. But the reason that Atlanteans fucking hate the surface world is because of global warming. And that makes a lot of sense. That's great, right? Because it gives the reason for this populace who are, you know, xenophobic and bigoted and hateful, right? A reason to be all of those things and create tension in Aquaman's life, where he is trying to be, like I said, this balancing act between, you know, kind of like between the two worlds. The fact that, you know, you have one group of people who are, you know, fundamentally like innocent and naive and ignorant, but also, you know, kind of destroying the planet, and another group of people who are angry, malicious, right? Kind of irrationally, you know, I don't know, like mob, like an irrational mob kind of thing. But they are for a very good reason. That's a good dynamic, right? When it comes to the politics. And there's a lot in Aquaman stories that deals with the very specific nature of that politics, right? Where he is, you know, dealing with insurrectionist coups against his rule because people don't like a surface dweller, right? One of the core things in Aquaman mythos that is not carried forward into the movies is that he was actually born in Atlantis, but he is born in Atlantis but cast out because he has blonde hair. And blonde hair is seen to be like, this is the superstitious part, it's seen to be like an omen of bad things, right? They are literally killing babies that have blonde hair because of this, you know, or whatever. And so that he is this like exile outcast king, all this other kind of stuff. I wish there was more of that in this movie, and I think that they were close to it. I like the stuff with the house, for instance. That was like really true Aquaman shit. Even though it was
the council?
Yeah, the council. It was mostly just, you know, sort of set dressing for the beginning of the movie. It didn't really go anywhere, and that's kind of fine, right? I'm not bent out of shape about it, but like that was the stuff that I liked, I guess, about like the overall political structure of the movie.
Yeah, no, I think there was interesting stuff there. I could have done a whole movie of like, you know, Atlantean political intrigue. I actually think while I was watching, I thought like this could have been a very cool like prestige series, right? Like, you know,
Atlantean Game of Thrones, yeah.
Well, not. I mean, just even the whole movie, right? Like, just like, you know,
sure,
different pieces where you do each part, and like the movie ends with the final confrontation, because things did feel a little rushed. But you know,
yeah, I do want to say for the record, we glossed over it, but it would have been a way better ending if there must always be a First of all, Kordax is not the Dead King. The Dead King is another Aquaman villain, but they're aping the Dead King. The Dead King is actually Atlan himself. In the actual Aquaman comics, the whole stuff with Atlan and Kordax is actually reversed. Kordax is the true king. Atlan is the usurper, essentially, because it mirrors what goes on with Aquaman and Orm, where Atlan kind of comes from outside. And there's this lost history between them where technically the bloodline should have followed Kordax's line, not Atlan's line, but like they rewrote essentially Atlantean history in order to kind of lionize Atlan and vilify Kordax. And then Kordax is the Dead King. Like I said, all that stuff is sort of reversed, but whatever the case may be, that's what they're like sort of aping. I feel like you could have done so much shit just with that, right? And the idea that there has to be somebody who, you know, like sits on this frozen throne with the ice trident or with the black trident like Frostmourne, that would have been so fucking cool. I probably would have lost my shit if that would have such a perfect end for Orm, right? Because that's exactly his character. It's like, I care about Atlantis. I'm going to save Atlantis by doing this thing, right? And he finally gets to be a king, but he's king of the Dead Kingdom, right? You know, the Lost Kingdom. He's not it would have been so perfect and so poetic, but you know, hey, whatever. What are you gonna do?
Yeah, and you can, like, you know, you can even have like resolution with like the Fisher people, right? Like, you know, you will serve your sentence in the kingdom of the dead, sitting on like, you know, the frozen throne, right?
Yeah.
Like,
and then you could have in Aquaman 3, when Aquaman gets super fucked by whatever person he's fighting, you could have his brother show up with the army of the dead, like in Lord of the Rings, and come full circle.
Exactly.
Exactly. Rip Aquaman 3. You know what? Honestly, rip the DC extended universe. Honestly, I'm gonna. I believe in James Gunn. I believe in the future of these movies. There's a part of me that's actually kind of worried that just like we're over superhero movies in general. Like obviously the Marvels just tanked. So many superhero movies this year have tanked because also the Flash, you know, Blue Beetle didn't perform. The Flash didn't perform. Quantumania didn't perform, and so there's a part of me that
the only movie that performed was Guardians, right? Like, yeah, the superhero movie.
And there's a part of me that's like Guardians is good. You know, like Guardians was a good movie. Across the Spider-Verse also did well. Both our Guardians and Across the Spider-Verse were good movies. These other movies were not as good. So even though I would say that Aquaman is in that okay territory, it's a B movie, right? It's obviously not going to perform. I think most people are over the DC extended universe. And frankly, I kind of wonder if people are over like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And maybe James Gunn, when he puts out Superman Legacy, which I'm very excited for, is going to reinvigorate things and make new stuff, good stuff happen. But maybe he isn't. And maybe we're just kind of moving past superhero movies to, I don't know, brand movies. What on earth connects Oppenheimer, Barbie, the Super Mario Brothers movies? Those are the $3 billion movies this year, I think. Right?
Yeah.
There might even be more.
I think part of it is like, you know, they are, for what it's worth, even if they're based on existing properties, they are kind of like original-ish is maybe the way to put it. At least they're not sequels, right? Like they're not, you know, infinite kind of sequel nonsense that we've been in for forever.
You know what? Honestly, yeah.
Who's playing Superman in Superman Legacy?
Some new kid. I don't remember his name, but he's like a new kid. He's been in a couple of other things or whatever. He looks okay. He looks the part. Honestly, there's a lot of little stuff in Superman Legacy that I'm really looking forward to. They casted a bunch of sort of extra superheroes, right? So I think Guy Gardner as Green Lantern is in there. A couple of other just sort of like a couple of other characters who are just like it suggests that this is going to be not a movie about like Man of Steel is like the introduction of superheroes into a mundane world, but it's going to be a movie about the introduction of Superman into a world full of superheroes, which I think would be I don't know. I think that's the kind of thing that makes me be like, oh, we can have Superman 1 for the 4th time, right?
Yeah. Yeah. How do you feel about it not being Henry?
I'm okay with that. I love Henry Cavill, obviously, but it would have bothered me probably, if I'm being honest. especially because this movie seems to look like a Superman is kind of like young and getting on top of things. But if it was Henry Cavill's almost my age, right? Like, he's
Right.
37, 39, something like that, right? When he played Superman, it was in his mid 20s, which made sense. He was pretty young now, but now, he's getting older. He's getting into that sort of middle age. And so, I think it would not have made sense for him to play Superman in this kind of like, I don't know, young upstart story that we think is Superman Legacy is going to end up being.
Fair enough. All right. Well, I assume we're at the hour mark.
We are at the hour mark. Yeah.
So how was your week?
How was my week? I played a lot of World of Warcraft, and then I played a lot of Satisfactory, and it was in that order. Okay. I was like just living on WoW all of last week, because I don't know why. I just got like my new, how I will sometimes get like roped down these sort of project rabbit holes,
Sure.
where it's just like I will become fixated on this thing. I didn't realize that there's a 34 slot bag that tailors can make called Azure Weave bags. Okay. And once I realized that I could put 34 slot bags and a 36 slot reagent bag on all of my characters, I just went into a frenzy in tailoring, and I leveled a bunch of characters who didn't have any professions. I maxed out. Yeah, I didn't max out their tailoring. But I did like give them a whole bunch of like tailoring skill points, just so that they could funnel those points into Azure weaving, like Azure Weave bags, or Azure Weave cloth, I guess, just so they could put that Azure Weave cloth onto a character who can make the bags. And that process, if I told you that process probably represents 10 or 20, I don't know, I have no idea what the going price for this stuff is. These bags they're bind down equip, right? They can be sold on the auction house. I bet if I went to the auction house, they probably wouldn't be that expensive. They would maybe be like 1,000, 2,000 gold maybe. And I could just do this whole thing by just dropping like 200,000 gold. I could like get enough bags to do for the rest of my life, right? But I've specifically not looked up the price and just sort of done the thing because I just want to do it. I just want to do it myself. I just want to like have it all be me, basically. Sure. And yeah, I don't know. For some reason, that's what I've become obsessed with. Also, I've just been running a lot of dungeons. Weirdly, healing is like my new thing. Jean Hao is basically a healer at this point. I am basically never doing DPS, partially because DPS kind of sucks as elemental, which is fun, but whatever. It is maybe the worst spec in the game, I would say, that I have played personally, just in terms of like, if I showed you the elemental rotation, you would be like, what the fuck? And like the ways you get damage, the way you get numbers out of the elemental rotation are really bad, really awful, and not fun. Yeah, I don't know. And so that's anyway, that's what I've been doing. I've just been playing a ton of WoW.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I was actually going to say that like I have actually been enjoying playing Windwalker. It's still probably not the most performant class, but the what is it? The set bonus basically mixes up the gameplay enough that it feels fresh. For those at home that don't know, essentially when it procs, which can either be, it's always off of like a free spinning crane kick, which means you always take that talent, or any normal hit might get it. Is it powers up your blackout kick, and that blackout kick will reduce like 3 or 4 cooldowns by a second. And so there's this nice balance of like, well, do I use it here when I'm only what do I need to do first? When can I use it? Should I be like doing my Rising Sun kick first or not? Like, how do I time things out to make it work? And there's a nice amount of like skill increase there and variety that makes the rotation a lot more fun for me. So I'm having a blast with it. It feels like there's like room for improvement there, essentially, right? And there's a lot of like decision points. Um, but I'm the reason I am on. I don't have my green screen behind me. Is I am not at my home. I am with my family for the holidays. And so um, my game time has been less. But I did watch two movies. I watched Saltburn and The Holdovers. Um, Saltburn's a weird movie. It's it's about basically a poor kid or a kid on scholarship at a prep school, befriends like the son of an aristocrat and gets invited to Saltburn Castle, their home, for the summer. And it's about like the weirdness of that family and like the intrigue there for the summer and dealing with that. And it's a weird movie. It's a it's got some interesting shots in it. It's got some good cinematography, as we like to say, and and the plot's a little bit weird. I'm not sure how I feel about it at the end of it, but it was definitely a thing that was cool to watch once. I don't think I'd watch it again, but I do think that people should check it out if they read the summary and are so inclined.
You know
we were
what's
watching
you know what's funny is the guy, I think maybe is this might be the Superman guy, Jacob Elordi. God, where the fuck is his IMDb? Why can't I just click his IMDb? Is he?
Just to finish my thought out while you look this up.
Okay.
While we were watching it, my brother was just kind of like, "Oh, everybody's doing this fucking A24 coloring now with like the purples and whatnot," which I thought was funny. Because it's like once he pointed it out, I saw it, but like my brother's in that world, so he sees those kinds of things. But anyway, you were saying about
yes, Jacob Elordi was up for Superman. He is not. Who is Superman in Superman Legacy? It is David Corenswit. Okay. Yeah, he has the look. I don't know what the fuck this guy is from, but if he's got the look down.
Yeah. I also watched what's it called?
The Holdovers?
The Holdovers. Yes, The Holdovers was very good. Um it's Paul Giamatti plays the teacher at a New England Preparatory Academy with a handful of students that are left the prep school over winter break while all their peers go home because they can't go home or whatever. They're stuck there, and Paul Giamatti's character is kind of like a stuck up professor that like doesn't get along with the students, and it's very heartwarming. It's shot like it's like a 70s or 80s coming of age movie. It's very sweet. It's a very good Christmas movie. I absolutely adored it. I would recommend it to everybody. For me, I think it's going to be a new Christmas classic. It's also very New England, very Boston, which kind of like speaks to me at this point in my life, right? I live it like I'm looking at these shots. It's like, do I know these places? And I didn't, but it looked like every town I passed through at home. So I thought it was I thought it was great, and it was just a ton of fun. Very stylish, very kind of period piecey. I just thought it was excellent.
You know what? Somebody I read something about how this is an interesting kind of nostalgia like phenomenon, right? Kind of like digging deep into kind of like this 80s archetype for the Holdovers for like Paul Giamatti's character and stuff like that. Everybody's talking about Paul Giamatti. That's how I knew this movie was as like the Paul Giamatti movie. And because these are a long time ago at this point, right? Like 30, 40 kind of years ago. And it's not just the tone and aesthetic, but it's also just like the actual kind of structure of the kinds of movies that came out back then, right? Which just like sent me down this rabbit hole of like, boy, what is it going to look like when we start to get like 90s nostalgia movies? Because the 90s really sucked for movies. But yeah, that like era of like I guess we would call them I don't know, like slacker's maybe the wrong words. Slobs versus snobs is the thing I think about. That's like Animal House, right? You know, you have the uppity, or like Police Academy is also sort of this, right? Where you have the like kind of the core conceit for the movie is that you have like a wise guy con man, you know, kind of comedian getting one up on the stuffy authoritarian, you know, whatever authority figure, right? Ferris Bueller versus the principal kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, it's not quite that, because the professor isn't a villain, right? Like in those movies, like the authority is the villain. This is heartwarming, right? This is like, you know, you're not so different, you and I type of deal, right? Like it's very sweet. And part of me wonders if the reason they framed it this way is because it is so simple, and there's not like a lot of kind of like, there's not like, you know, a lot of modern conflict in it, I guess. I mean, there's some parts of it that are like, you know, oh, well, you know, it needs to be like, if it said here, there's no cell phones. It makes certain things very easy, right? But also part of it is just like, you don't have to touch it any kind of like or you can get away with some of avoiding some of the cultural stuff, maybe. I don't know. It is a very set piece time, right? Like, even the people I know that, like, we know a couple people who went to these type of prep schools, and I'm not convinced it was like this when they went there, just because, like, you know, it would have been 30, 40 years later, right? Like, you know, I think this movie technically takes place in New Year's Eve 1971, New Year's Day 1971 is like a day in the movie.
Okay.
So, you know, yeah, you know, obviously there's a lot of time that's passed. But, you know, it's a good movie, and I would recommend it. I would probably say, like, right, it just left theaters, so the rental is like $20 on Amazon Prime. I would say wait for that. Don't rent it for $20. Wait till it drops to like the normal like 8 or whatever.
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
But I would recommend it to people.
Yeah. The other game that I ended up playing was Satisfactory, which is sort of first-person Factorio. It's one of these. Monic called these automation games. Do you feel like that's like a good genre, automation games?
Yeah, because it distinguishes between something like a Minecraft or a what was the Viking one that we played for a while?
Valheim.
Valheim. It distinguishes between like Valheim, in fact, and Minecraft 2, between like that and like a Satisfactory or a Factorio, or there's a couple other games of this thing where it's like, it's less about like the creative building and more about like the automation and efficiency stuff.
Yeah. There's a weird joy, like a perfectionist joy that comes out of creating a mathematically perfect system. And I'm good at that in Factorio, right? Like, I'm good at intuiting the numbers to know, okay, how much iron production do I need in order to fuel this, right? But the thing that I ended up doing was sort of the infinite run factory. Did you ever play Factorio?
Yes.
Okay. In Factorio, I don't know that this is true. This is what I found to be true. I don't know, like, the Factorio meta, right? I found what's called an infinite run factory to be the best way for me to organize my factory, which is I have, for people at home, this is going to be so hard to visualize, but let's say I have my base, and then extending east from my base, I just have long lines on conveyor belts of stuff, right? The stuff needed to craft other stuff. So screws, or they're not screws, they're bolts, I think, actually, in Factorio, right? So iron plates into bolts, into circuitry, whatever, you know, like whatever that looks like, right? You would have one line that's iron plates, and then one line that's bolts, and then one line that's, you know, circuitry, right? And whenever I need something, whenever I need a new piece of production for the product line, right? What I do is I build south of this line, and I put a splitter into the thing, and I just, you know, I take all of this stuff, and then I take the products off the line, I assemble them or whatever, and then I just have another line that goes north and put it back into the line as a new line atop all of the other lines that says, okay, the new thing that I have just crafted, inserters, this goes on like this line, and it's how my whole factory sort of like runs. The problem with an endless run factory is you don't do any of these math, and I think I actually sort of fell out of love with Factorio because I realized that this is probably the most efficient way to sort of structure things. What you want to do is you just want to oversaturate the shit out of your factory. If you are low on bolts, you just go to that line and you make more bolts at the bottom of it, right? If you need more iron, you just add more iron production to the input and and make sure that you are just constantly flowing with resources, that you are, for anything that is drawing resources, there is an overabundance of those resources at all times, that you are just constantly flowing through the, kind of through the production line. Satisfactory is less complex than Factorio. It doesn't seem like there are as many like assembling parts and stuff like that. There are fewer sort of like stepping stones to kind of valuable pieces, right? So for instance, in Factorio, in order to build conveyor belts, you need to build bolts, you need to build iron plates, you need to build iron rods, maybe. I don't even remember what the recipe is, right? In order to build a conveyor belt in Satisfactory, you just need one iron plate, right? If you have an iron plate, you can place a conveyor belt. If you have 1,000 iron plates, you can place 1,000 conveyor belts. And that's actually also true for the more advanced conveyor belts as well, right? In Factorio, in order to make advanced, in order to make red conveyor belts, you need something in order to make blue the fastest conveyor belts. You need lubrication, right? You need lubricant in order to do that, which is like, now you have to do like fluid dynamics and all this other sort of stuff. Satisfactory gets rid of all that, right? You have plates, you have reinforced plates, and then you have steel beams. And that's how you make each of the 3 levels of conveyor belt, essentially. The place where Satisfactory gets complicated, though, is the 3D nature of it, right? Because because it's in first person, the actual production of the thing, right, takes up a whole new access compared to the kind of top-down view on Factorio, where you can now stack conveyor belts, right, in order to be efficient with your spacing, right? There are, supports so that you can make a conveyor belt go way in the air over something if you need to do that, right? There are, there's stuff that you can do about specific places for like inputs and the way curves work and how you need to get a thing and curve it into kind of another thing in order to make all this stuff work. And then also, anytime you're ever making something, it just says right up front how many things per minute you are creating and how many things per minute you need in terms of resources, right? Which means that like when you put a mine down on a normal piece of iron, you are producing 60 iron ore in a minute, right? But your smelters can smelt 30 pieces of iron ore into 30 iron ingots, right? So, okay, for each mine, I have 2 smelters, right? And then I'm looking at my smelters and I have these iron ingots and it's like, okay, in order to make rods, I need those break down into 15 a minute, right? So it's 4 constructors for iron rods for one mine, for 160 mine, right? And you're just like, you're doing all of that kind of math and it gets really complex and complicated because you also have to split things evenly, right? So now you have 1 track and you split it into 2 tracks. Okay, now your 2 tracks are 30, but let's say you need 20 each. Okay, well now you can split things into 3. And it's just like doing all of that math and all of that construction. That's the thing that I sort of lost a little bit by playing Factorio to where I created this infinite run factory. And I am getting it back. I have finally got it back with Satisfactory, and that feels really good. It feels really fun. So yeah, I don't know. That's the game I've been playing.
Very cool.
Do you like these or do you not like these? What's on your mind?
I have generally liked this style of game. I just don't always have the time to drop into it. Right, like I played a bunch of Factorio, but that was a while ago. I just find myself kind of like I have less time for gaming now than I historically have. I think part of that's just kind of like I watch too much YouTube, so I'm trying to cut that back. But I have nothing against automation games. In fact, as Monica discussed last week, I'm kind of working on one. So it's a fun. It is a fun idea to me. It's just there's a you have to kind of like hit all those numbers right in order for the game to work, and so I think that's sometimes the problems, right? Is if things don't quite line up, like you were saying, right? Like if it's too easy to optimize the fun out of the game, like basically what it sounds like to me is happened with you in Factorio. I never got that deep in Factorio. I basically got to like a couple science levels in, and then I kind of just it's like I put the game down and didn't come back to it, just not because they hated it, but just because I didn't have the time. Um, it feels like this is kind of like very water finds a crack type of thing, and if it seems like what you're saying is it's easier to is like basically there's always a part of these games that's like waiting for like enough things to accumulate, and it sounds like that it is ideally the way you'd have your resources, the rarity set up such that you have to really optimize to get like a decent rate out of the end state. But what it sounds like is that like um the terminal products part of it is always like takes so much longer to do that the time you spend setting up the inputs and like over flooding those is always so minimal comparatively that um that like it does never make sense to try and like optimize those things. It's always just like set up as much input as possible and just like you'll be rate limited by output, but that's just kind of like that's always going to be the case. You're not really losing anything by just setting up abundance and input first. Am I characterizing your complaint correctly?
That's interesting. I think that's kind of true for Factorio. And maybe less true for Satisfactory. For Satisfactory, I'm caring much more about the rate of conveyor belts. So I'm sorry, to back this up. The conveyor belts have different speeds, right? And I never really intuited this when it came to Factorio. I sort of just like generally knew that, if I want to, I need more production of bolts because my downline of my factory is using too many bolts. So I'm going to add more bolts. Well, the thing is, if your conveyor belts are moving too slow, you can't actually fuel that many assemblers, right? You can't fuel enough in order to get the output of bolts. And so the way that you address that is you have faster conveyor belts, because your faster conveyor belts can oversaturate that line of iron plates coming in order to put it on the bolts line, right? Satisfactory cares much more about that, it seems like. The conveyor belt Mark 1 moves 60 things a minute, which means that you can never so for instance, screws turn out 40 per. You take one iron rod and it turns into 4 screws, so an input of 10 iron rods creates I just set up this factory, so I'm using this as an example. It creates 40 screws, right? But that actually sort of is a problem a little bit, because if you're only using Mark 1 lines, it means that one constructor of screws is 2/3 of your whole line, right? And so the way that I have had to deal with screws is I'm now going and upgrading the conveyor belts on that line in order to deliver 270 screws per second, rather than, what I had originally been delivering, which was 180. Or I'm sorry, was it 120? Yeah, I guess it does jump, huh? It goes 61, 20, 270. I wonder what the math behind that is like. But for whatever reason, that's like what the math is. And so it's like that process takes like a bunch of time and a bunch of effort, and like optimizing all of that in order to deliver the screws into the terminal products is kind of like, I don't know, it's like the thing. I will say the one part about Factorio that sucks about all this stuff, the upside of seeing these rates, is it lets you get that sort of like optimization pleasure of like, yes, I have the most beautifully mathematically perfect system. Great. But it also means that there are times when I look at something and I go, oh my God, I need 50 of these and I am producing 2 per minute, which means that I just need to wait 25 minutes for me to get 50. And then I dump them in a thing and I move on. Right. And that sort of, I don't know, like that sucks, but maybe it's just part and parcel with how this stuff works. The one other piece of Satisfactory that I have not done a ton of, I'm playing with Rachel, and so there's a whole part of Satisfactory that's just about exploration and kind of doing first person survival craft shit, running around, building a car, building equipment, getting a chainsaw to chainsaw down trees, getting a gun so you can kill wildlife because there's aliens that are trying to kill you. The process of doing all of that stuff obviously takes a bunch of time and effort. I actually yesterday Rachel built a car and I was like, oh my God, that's so cool. I got in the car. I immediately started driving. I hit a rock and I flew into the air and then I fell back down. I was like, oh my God, that's awesome. I keep driving. I vault off of another rock out into a bottomless pit that I didn't know was on the other side of this cliff. And I died and I lost the car just within 60 seconds of getting into it. And it's like, there's that, I don't know, there's that kind of stuff that also makes this run. I have just been optimizing our factory basically. And so my whole time has basically been spent doing this, doing this optimization shit.
Very cool. Yeah,
okay.
That's very cool. Yeah. We should probably get out of here. I also noticed that we forgot to write an announcement for this one, so sorry to anybody who didn't get the...
Oh my God, did I not write an announcement? Oh my God, I just didn't press enter. That's embarrassing. Whatever.
No worries. We also got to get to raids, so I'm going to say, if you'd like to email us about any of the things we talked about on this podcast, email us at subversivegames@gmail.com or podcast@subversivegames.com. You can follow us on twitch.tv/subversivegames or youtube.com/subversivegames for these go out live. Rate reviews wherever you can find podcasts. All the links will be down in the description. We are not going to be here next week. We're taking a New Year's week off. But buddy, do you have anything you're looking to promote?
I have nothing I'm looking to promote right now. Yeah.
Well, to all the derps out there, enjoy your New Year's. Until next time, dear listeners.
Until next time, loyal listeners. Okay.
Awesome.
Oh,